Michael Steele served as chairman of the RNC. Tara Setmayer worked as Republican communications director on Capitol Hill, and both join me now. Tara is someone who worked on the Hill and knows this caucus very, very well. Some of the same folks that you worked among are still there. There's some new ones. How much did I get that right, I guess? Like, is that broadly the contours of how you see this?
Yeah, you nailed it. I could have written that monologue for you. I was nodding my head going, yep, yeah, I get it. This is really reminiscent of what happened in 2015. I mean, it's so many of the dynamics are similar. I remember back then the description of McCarthy withdrawing suddenly back when he was this close to becoming speaker. He withdrew suddenly, Michael will remember, standing there with his wife and a very shocked caucus at the time because nobody saw it coming until he did it. And the description was, it was chaos. They didn't know what to do. Boehner was like, what? And Paul Ryan said, I don't want the job. I just want to be Ways and Means chairman. Like, it was absolute chaos. And, you know, Kevin McCarthy was not fit to be leader then, and he's not fit to be leader now. He would be the weakest speaker of the House in a century. He'd be a Spino. Okay, he'd be a speaker in name only because the people running the show will be the Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, MAGA wing of the party, because Kevin will have sold off every little piece of his soul he has left in order to get that speakership. If he ends up getting it, I'm still not convinced that he will. But desperation is a very pitiful position to be in, and that's exactly the position that Kevin McCarthy is in right now. What kind of leader will that be moving forward?
Yeah, and there's this formal mechanism, Michael, which is a little weedsy, but I think worth taking 15 seconds to explain, which is this thing called motion to recommit, or motion to vacate the chair, right?
Vacate.
Motion to vacate the chair, right? Which is basically like calling for a no confidence vote to take the speaker's power away whenever you want. And one of the things they're negotiating for, they want this kind of meta formal concession, which is give us this power, which is to hold a veto over your head at over times, which then means that down the road, every day you go in, you can have a no confidence vote. And so you literally have no power.
No, you don't. In fact, that approach led to the frustration and the inability of both Boehner and Ryan to really govern and negotiate. They started using that, particularly in Ryan's case, the threat to execute that particular provision. And so, you know, Kevin, having watched and learned from some of this, obviously doesn't want to go into that room, right? You know, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, inside beckoning him in, come on in, Kevin, come on in. And Kevin's like, nah, I think I just want to go down the hall. But the problem is you can't go down the hall without figuring out how to get past that room. And so that's kind of one of the leverage pieces that Kevin finds himself confronting right now. And the reality of it is exactly as you laid it out in the opening, which was spot on, was that this guy he wants a job that nobody in the Republican caucus wants to give him. He wants a job that even if they decided to move towards him, Donald Trump at the 11th hour could sweep in and go, don't want Kevin.
Yeah.
What do you think happens at that point? So this is the new reality. And the governing piece, I mean, I think we just need to disabuse ourselves of any notion about governing coming out of a Republican-led Congress. They've already told us what their agenda is going to be. Party with no platform is interested in Hunter Biden, not in policy and health care and the environment.
Yeah, and that point about Trump is a great one as well. I mean, at any point he can come in and say, you know, what he does all the time. And when you compare that to the Senate, right, Trump does that all the time with McConnell, but McConnell has genuine respect and relationships with his members, Tara. He can actually control them. He also does have like a vision of what he wants Republicans to do in office. There is, and that means delivering on these must passes. He doesn't want shutdowns generally because that doesn't actually help the interests of like corporate America. The people, it really doesn't. They don't want shutdowns. The problem, though, is on these must-pass things, like, I just don't see the way out of the box. Like, again, like, there's gonna be moments when you just have to have must-pass votes to keep the machine going. And he's not gonna be able to secure enough votes from the Republican Party for those.
No, and the issue here is that he's going to promise, he's going to put these performances on, like you just saw on Laura Ingraham, and say yes, 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 and placate everyone so that he can try to get in there. And then he is going to end up having to strike deals. This is the same thing. Even back in 2015, we had a debt ceiling debate, we had an omnibus debate, same environment, because these types of things come up often. It's part of the governing job. But he is, this group is ungovernable. We already know this. And so Donald Trump is waiting in the wings, as Michael explained. He's just waiting to pull the rug out from under him. Donald Trump gets off on the power that he has over my Kevin, remember? So if someone else comes to Trump, like I've heard that the Steve Scalise's people were, that there was some issue where, well, maybe you have Steve Scalise as an option, or Elise Stefanik. If these people who are more Trumpy come in and promise Donald Trump that they will support him, guess what? My Kevin will be out on the curb. Yeah. So Kevin McCarthy is not in a great position here. And I would not be surprised if you saw that there would be multiple ballots and someone else steps in who is not Kevin McCarthy, but a Steve Scalise or Elise Stefanik waiting in the wings to knife him from behind.
Watch the throne, Kevin. Michael Steele, Tara Setmayer, thank you both.
All right.